What's up, everyone? We're live again at TLN. I'm Kevin Boilard, joined by James Hogan. Hoagie, what's going on, man?
What's up, Kev? How we doing? Let's go.
Doing
Good
well.
to be back.
Hope you're feeling a little wild today because we're going to count down the top 5 biggest wild cards in college lacrosse. I'm checking into the comment section here. I see Drew, Olivia, Owen, Cam, Daniel, Jay, Pope, everyone. Drop in, say hello, let us know who you're rooting for, where you're watching from, any big predictions for the D1 college lacrosse season. It's coming up. It's less than 2 weeks away, believe it or not, Hoagie.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're this close to lacrosse season. We got a ton of good games, too, in that week 0, if you want to call it the week 0. We got like Richmond, Maryland.
I don't want to call it week 0. Awesome. I'm calling it week 1, Hoagie.
We're calling it week 1. Let's call it week 1.
I'm not calling it week 0. No,
lacrosse starting in January. I can't wait. I'm already itching at it, but we got 2 weeks, and we're back to lacrosse all the way through the end of September. So good time to be a lacrosse fan. Love seeing everything on Twitter, on socials. Everyone kind of starting to talk about the sport again. Previewing teams, AP. I said AP, but the rankings came out today. The poll.
Yes.
So a lot of crazy things. Crazy. Syracuse didn't get a singular number 1 vote, which is wild to me. If the Orange needed any more motivation to get it done this year, there you go. But Cornell, I saw, got 4. UNC got 1, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, lacrosse is here, so super excited.
Awesome. I see you guys in the comments. Come on, keep dropping those comments in throughout. A little explainer, because we said wildcard teams. What do we mean by wildcard teams? If you've watched our live videos, we did an ACC preview, we did a Big Ten preview. Now we're going to talk about 5 teams that are not in the ACC, not in the Big Ten, that can mix things up, can get into the national championship conversation. Some of them are maybe even front runners, but we're going to call them wild cards because 20 of the last 25 NCAA championships have been won by teams that currently play in either the ACC or the Big Ten. The most recent team to buck that, Cornell last year. We'll see if they're on the list. Yale did it in 2018. Any others you remember, Hoagie?
Denver got to be Denver in 2015. That's 3. So it's going back to what, to 2000?
To 2000.
Loyola
2012.
And then Princeton.
A little bit of a cheat, but Princeton in 2001 at the tail end of their dynasty. But they haven't won since then, so guess what? They're in the wild card category. So let's start it right now with number 5. We've got our little handy graphic right here. But Hoagie, I want to know who you got coming in at number 5 as a wild card team to watch heading into the 2026 season.
Yeah, at number 5, I got the Army Black Knights, who've been a big topic of discussion over the last couple of years, especially with them not making the tournament the last couple of years. And, people have felt strongly one way or the other they should have got in, or people saying they shouldn't. Obviously they've been in the top 10 for the last 2 years. And the last time we saw them in the NCAA tournament, they beat Maryland. So, look, they're definitely a team that I think has been hungry to get to the tournament. And there's been a lot of talk about, where they lie in terms of at-large bids and so on and so forth. But I mean, Army and Joe Alberici, you got to give him credit. He's got his teams year after year. They lose guys, and somehow they're stars to return and fill the roles right away. The culture is awesome. The team seems to always be there every single year, and they're a team that, week in, week out, you play them, they're going to give you their best shot. So,
yeah, our audience has a lot of opinions about Army. Guys, let me know in the comment section if you think Army should be more respected by the NCAA selection committee. I'm about to ask Hoagie that same question, but just for a little context, the last 2 years, snubbed. 12-2 last year, didn't make it. 11-3 the year before that, didn't make it. Now, of course, they're not winning the Patriot League. That's their ticket to get in. If you win, take care of business, go undefeated in the tournament, win your conference tournament, you get the automatic qualifier. But Army feels like this weird team that maybe should start to get some consideration outside of what happens in that 1 weekend or 2 weeks in May, where we're looking at the Patriot League tournament, and instead look at their full resume, because all year they're looking like one of the better teams in the league. And it's one little fact I want to give the audience and you, Hoagie, I'm not sure if you're aware, they're the only team, Army is, in the past 5 years to keep Maryland out of the championship game. Think about it. The last time Army made the NCAA tournament, they upset Maryland. How about that? And every other year, they go to the championship.
It's crazy because, we always talk about it when we come on air here and talk death taxes, Maryland Final Four, right? And they're the team that's kept them out of it as of late. And look, if we're talking about Army and the NCAA tournament and, what respect they should get from the committee and so on and so forth, and should they have made it, should they have not? Obviously, like we said, it's a very hot discussion. But, Army's won a lot of big games over the last couple of years. They've beat North Carolina 2 years in a row. They beat Syracuse 2 years ago as well. So, they've had an argument to say, hey, we've beaten some of these top teams. We've competed with some of the top teams. And look, just because we don't win our conference doesn't mean that the other teams who don't win their conference, who we beat, still get to get in the tournament. So I see both sides of it. Is Army to me a team that if they make the NCAA tournament can make a run? 100%. Are they a team that's 100% an NCAA tournament worthy team? 100% without a doubt. I mean, look what they did last time they got in. They beat Maryland and were 1 goal away from championship weekend, losing to Penn State by a goal. And if you remember, they actually scored as time expired just late, or that game would have went to overtime. But so if you're asking me if you think they can compete and you think they can get in the tournament, and they should get in the tournament, for sure. But on the other hand, the RPI hasn't been there. The strength of schedule hasn't been there. And to no fault of their own, the Patriot League has a ton of teams, so they don't get as many chances out of conference. But the numbers and the metrics, which is what the biggest thing is in lacrosse, has not supported Army. And at this current moment, the Patriot League is not a 2-bid league. They're not getting 2 teams in the NCAA tournament. The Patriot League tournament champion is always automatically an automatic qualifier in the tournament. Therefore, the last 2 years, they haven't won the Patriot League. Sorry, they're on the outside looking in. So that's how I see it. If the question is, can they compete, and would you love to see them in there? 100%. But if you're asking me if they got snubbed the last 2 years, no, you got to win the Patriot League. You got to win your conference. Patriot League, just a 1-bid league right now.
Fine, fair enough. But I remember watching them beat UNC last year, and then UNC, what did they do? They let me down. They lost in the NCAA tournament at home to Richmond. I got to imagine Army would have put up a better fight in that game, but that's just one game. I understand the resume is not there. Also, you got to feel bad for Army in the sense that I think they want to go play these games. If you think about it, a couple of years back, they went to the Dome. They beat Syracuse in overtime, and then they haven't been invited back since. So I don't think teams are really chomping at the bit to go play Army either.
Yeah, that's obviously been another topic discussion of like Army's had trouble scheduling teams because teams don't want to play them for obvious reasons. You're getting in a 60-minute dogfight when you play Coach Alberici's squad at Army. It's not going to be an easy game. So teams don't want to play them, and they feel like they have more to lose than they do to gain from an opponent standpoint. But yeah, I think Army, bottom line is it stinks, but you got to win the Patriot League. You got to win the tournament. It's kind of how it is in like March Madness and stuff. A lot of those lower level conferences are not multi-bid leagues. And unfortunately, unless the NCAA tournament expands in the future, the Patriot League is going to continue to be a 1-bid league just due to the strength in that conference. So It's been tough, but I think they're going to break through soon.
Right. And let's talk about that, because at the end of the day, if you take care of business, you're in the NCAA tournament, and we're not talking about snubs because you won your conference. So let's talk about the Patriot League. If Army is really so dominant, they should have no trouble winning this tournament. And yet the last couple of years, they've not been able to. So I want to know who you think is their biggest threat heading into the 2026 season. There's some options there. Boston U's got to kind of had their number in recent years. Navy's always a big, Army-Navy game. Doesn't really matter what the records are. Maybe a bounce back year for Loyola. When you look at the Patriot League, who do you see as Army's biggest threat?
Yeah, I think the Patriot League is one of the most competitive conferences year in, year out in terms of like the teams are so even that are in the conference. And I feel like you see a lot of shuffling of teams who either are terrible the year before and then win the conference. You had Lehigh 2 years ago win the Patriot League tournament. Colgate came out of nowhere last year. So there's always wild cards. You really don't know how those teams are. But if there's one team to me that's been super consistent over the last couple of years, at least towards the top of the conference, it's been Boston. And I think Boston is the biggest threat to Army in the Patriot League. Obviously, Kev, you just mentioned it. Boston's won 5 straight games versus Army, which is crazy when you really put that into terms. But it has to be Boston to me. They were super young team a season ago. And to me, Ryan Poley is one of the most underrated coaches in the entire country. I think he's got his team year after year. They play hard. They're always competitive. They run that fun 10-man ride, play that aggressive style. That's really a pain to play for. If you're an opponent, you don't want to play BU. But also, to me, the biggest guy, Timothy Shanahan, Patriot League Player of the Year last year, or Patriot League Freshman of the Year last year. I think he's going to take a massive jump and be a massive player in that league this year and nationally. So for me, it's going to be Boston. I know Navy, there's a rivalry it's involved, and there's always going to be some type of wild card in the conference. But if you're asking me who's been the most consistent team outside Army in the Patriot League over the last couple of years, it's going to be Boston. And I think Boston's going to give them the biggest trouble.
Yeah, and Colgate, who knocked him out last year, shouldn't be as dangerous without the Connor brothers. They're going to come up later in this show. Navy, I mentioned last year, went to overtime, but 3 of the last 6 have gone to overtime with Navy. And then I really think Loyola is going to bounce back. Last year was too weird with the 3-11. What was that? Like,
Yeah.
they're not going to be that bad again.
They didn't get a win till April, I think, last year. I remember we were talking about that. We were like, if you told me that it would be late April and Loyola wouldn't have a singular win, I would have said you're crazy. And we talked about it at the show. It was crazy.
And then they were going into that final game of the regular season against Army, and we were kind of like, I wouldn't be surprised if Loyola won this game, as good as Army was.
Yeah, playing with some house money there, at least at the end. I think their first win was against Lehigh, I believe.
Yeah.
I want to say it was Lehigh.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So-
we'll see. We'll see if Loyola can bounce back.
And the Patriot League is notoriously wild. Anything can happen. And as you see, Army is oftentimes left on the outside looking in because of it. But I'm excited for college lacrosse season, particularly the Patriot League, just because of the pure chaos factor. I love it. But looking back, turning it back, introspective on Army here. Obviously, big loss in Jackson Eicher. It was a Tewaaraton Award finalist, 85 points last year, attackman of the year, undrafted player in the PLL, but really only because of the uncertainty around his military commitment. Talent-wise, this was a first or second round talent, and he showed it. Was in the mix for Rookie of the Year, ultimately went to Chris Kavanaugh, but was certainly deserving of that level of recognition, being a finalist for it. But he's not the only one that they lost. They lost some big names across the board. AJ Pilot, defense. Christian Mazer was one of the best short stick defensive midfielders. Christian Fournier, long stick midfielder. All 3 of those guys were all first team All-Americans last year. And then also Will Coletti at faceoff, who, in my opinion, when healthy, probably was a first or second team All-American level talent, was banged up. So, maybe not as big a loss as it would have seemed on paper. But I'm curious, did Army lose too much talent from 2025 to rebuild for 2026?
Yeah, I mean, they lost obviously a lot of talented players, a lot of true pillars of that program. When you look at guys Eicher, Pilot, Mauser, Coletti, you think of Army lacrosse over the last couple of years. I think of a guy like Will Coletti, just an absolute warrior of a player, obviously. But I still think they have a ton of studs that are still back. Kind of like I said, Coach A always has these guys, you don't hear of, and then all of a sudden they get their shot and they play really well. The Plunkett brothers, obviously, first ones that come to mind, obviously Evan Plunkett and his brother, 2 of the biggest leaders on that team now and biggest contributors back. I think a guy like Gunnar Fellows as well, a guy who's been a contributor for the last couple of years. But to me also, maybe the biggest pillar, an underrated pillar they bring back is they bring back Sean Byrne and net. I think that's a big piece for him to be that kind of that anchor, that defense. And like I said before, they kind of always seem to have a new star player in waiting. So, who's ready to step up. So I'm excited to see who that is this year that we learn about. But yeah, obviously they lost a lot, but a ton of great names with Plunkett, Fellows, Byrne, who are back again with Army this year. And I think all of those guys are going to be truly hungry to kind of finally get over the hump. I know we said last year after they got snubbed the year before, they were going to be hungry last year. I think there's a literal extra, layer of motivation this year to really get it done for that Army team.
Yeah, Eicher's the big name, but there's those 3 other guys that I mentioned that were first team All-American, all on the defensive side of the ball. Good thing they're bringing back Sean Byrne, but I actually think their offense could be better with how much talent they're bringing back. You mentioned the Hill brothers, Hill, Plunkett, and then also Braden Fountain were both freshmen last year, and they were awesome. So I could see their offense actually making a little bit of a leap this year, and maybe not be so reliant on Jackson Eicher to go get them a goal whenever they need it. I think that Plunkett is going to be that guy. Evan Plunkett's going to be that guy for them. He'll be a first team All-American this year.
For sure.
Cool. Okay, any other thoughts on Army before we move on?
I think we're ready to go to number 4.
All right, let's reveal number 4. Tell us who it is.
Number 4, we got the Richmond Spiders, the program on the rise and probably the hottest new program really arriving on the scene last year. Obviously, started the program in 2014 and last year finally got over the hump. They've been a program since 2014. They've made the NCAA tournament 7 times. So crazy they've made the tournament that many times. Finally got over the hump, obviously winning that massive game at North Carolina last year. And we're a goal away from championship weekend. They took Cornell to the brink, not only in the quarters, but also during the regular season. Had a two loss to Maryland earlier in the year as well, had a double OT loss to Duke. So, that team has been knocking on the doorstep for the last couple of years now. Dan Shamati has done a tremendous job with that program, and a program that wasn't even fully funded until the beginning of last season. So, this team to me is a team that, has finally, I think, arrived on that stage. And if we're talking about Coach 𝐓𝐇𝐄 and how he's kind of elevated Richmond to where they are, like he's built this program with, kids who love the game, feel like they've been overlooked to some degree. And, he's kind of got guys who just are dogs. The Richmond team, you listen to them talk, they don't feel like an underdog. Like they expect to go win. They step on the field with ACC, Big Ten teams, and they expect that they're on that same level playing field. And I know that was a big talk last year after the UNC game that those kids felt like, look, we don't look at ourselves as underdogs playing North Carolina. We see ourselves as just another game, and they got it done in a massive step. So I can't wait to see them, how they do this year.
You could say that they don't view themselves as underdogs, but I definitely think they play like underdogs. They play hungry. And you saw it when they had upset wins over like UVA this past year in Charlottesville. First time they'd ever won in Charlottesville. First time they'd ever won a NCAA tournament game on the road at Chapel Hill. You could see the emotional level that came with that. So I think they relish those opportunities to kind of shake things up. But what do you think is the biggest key to Dan 𝐓𝐇𝐄, like getting this program to where it is in such a short time when we've seen other programs, startup programs, kind of in the same place that they were 10 or 15 years ago? What's working for Richmond, and what is it about Dan 𝐓𝐄𝐄?
Yeah, I think too. It's just buy-in and it's mindset right off the bat. Like he's gotten these guys believing, and he's gotten these, kind of a little bit like Coach 𝐓𝐇𝐄 at Indiana, like a little bit of a flip of like, you got to rethink how people think, right? Like when the expectations are low, the thoughts are going to be low and you're going to shoot for low. Like, not to bring in college football here, but Coach 𝐓𝐇𝐄, when he got to Indiana, said, I had to rethink how guys approach things. I had to, rewire how people, administration and everyone kind of thought, how can we be successful here? Because everyone there was like, oh, it can't be done at Indiana. It can't be done here. Like same kind of thing with Richmond. I think 𝐓𝐇𝐄𝐄's like, why can't we win? Why can't we make the tournament? Why can't we make the Final Four? Why can't we win a national championship? Where some people on the outside and maybe even administration at first are like, look, we just want to build a program, bring some more East Coast kids to our school, do well, et cetera, et cetera. Like I think, he's got those guys buying in. He recruited kids who want to win, want to play lacrosse, and maybe we're overlooked. But I also think he's built this program on defense. I think this team defensively over the last couple of years has been as strong as anyone. They're not scared as anyone. They're physical. They play hard. And like we said, Kev, they got a bunch of dogs on that team. So the culture, the way they think, under-recruited kids, you mix all that together with a great coach and a great mind like Dan 𝐓𝐄𝐄, and that's why you have the success that Richmond's had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and again, they were 14-4 last year, but Hoagie outlined each of those losses. 2 one-goal losses to Cornell, a loss to Maryland in the first game of the season. Hey, happens to everybody. And a double overtime loss to Duke. I mean, everyone else they're beating. To me, that tells me this is a team that might be even better than their 14-4 record led on. Don't be fooled by the A10 conference resume or whatever. This is a legit team that's really kind of like, I don't want to say the blue blood word, but they're starting to like perform like that. And they're carrying themselves like that. So I would love to see them string a couple of great seasons together. I'd like to see them take an even bigger leap. Again, these are wild card teams that could win the Natty. So we're really talking about Richmond with a lot of respect here after they just got their first NCAA tournament win. But I want to talk about defense and talk about a couple of guys in particular. On the screen, I have Lucas Littlejohn and Hunter Smith. Hunter Smith's the top defenseman on the team. Lucas Littlejohn is a great attackman who just played for the U20 Canada squad and won gold in Jeju over the summer. But 2 other guys I want to talk about, not those guys. I think this has got to be the grittiest duo of midfielders in the country. I'm curious if you agree with me. In Jack Pilling and Charlie Packard. I love these 2.
Without a doubt, the grittiest. And this kind of fits into what we're talking about of why Richmond's been successful as a program, as a culture and stuff. It's guys like Jack Pilling. It's guys like Charlie Packard. Gritty, short stick D-middies. Obviously, Pilling was a 3rd-team All-American last year. Packard was a 2-way stud for Team USA U20s last year. So these are guys who are gritty, get in your face, not scared of anyone, line up across me, come at me kind of guys. And, those guys obviously fit the identity of this team and stuff. And then, obviously, yeah, when you pair it with Hunter Smith, who's been unbelievable over the last couple of years at close defense. Like this is a Richmond lacrosse program that prides themselves on defense as a program. That's their identity. That's what Richmond lacrosse is. Gritty, strong, tough. I can't think of 3 bigger guys than Hunter Smith, Jack Pilling, and Charlie Packard to really show what Richmond lacrosse is. These guys are as gritty as they could come, Kevin. I think you're right. They might be the grittiest duo in all of D1.
Charlie Packard's awesome. I love him as a 2-way guy. I think he's like a little mini Ada McGuire right now. Like he's coming up like that, especially down the stretch last year in the NCAA tournament. He was scoring goals, scored a goal in the A10 championship game. He really came on late. He was only a sophomore. So we got 2 more years of Charlie Packer, and I think he's a big name that you're going to hear about more over the next couple of years, and he's probably going to be in the PLL one day. So
yeah, and these guys too. We talked about defense, Kev, on offense. Return a ton of great players as well. They returned 4 of their top 5 scorers from last year. Lucas Littlejohn maybe has the best name of all of college lacrosse, but also performs on the field. I love his game. Obviously, people talk about Aiden O'Neill as well. Gavin Creo, another really underrated guy. So this is a really deep group. They have a ton of midfielders. They run multiple lines. So these guys are always usually fresh when they're out there. So not just on defense is this Richmond team scary, but the offense. And I think this year is the first year that, last year, if you said they were national title championship weekend contenders, people would maybe call you a little crazy. I think they legit can, get there this year, at least back to the quarterfinals for sure. This is a legit well-oiled machine, this Richmond team. They're going to come hungry. It'll be interesting to see this year now how they handle having expectations. We said they don't like to be an underdog, but in a way they were the underdog, Kev. And now they're going to kind of have that bullseye on their back more and have more expected of them. And that comes with winning games. So as the expectations rise, the pressure rises. So I'm interested to see how this Richmond team, kind of responds to all that.
I see Dukes in the comment section.
Yeah, Dukes. What's up, Dukes? I see him
Lax in the comment section. Start mixing
He's
it up.
He's talking about Providence, his Friars in there.
Of course. All right. Anyway, one last question here about the A10 in general, kind of before we move on for Richmond. For those who don't know, they're adding Delaware this year. Delaware's coming over from the CAA, is now in the A10. So to round out this conference, you've got Richmond, Delaware, St. Joe's, High Point, UMass, Hobart, St. Bonaventure. Where do you think this conference ranks among the best D1 conferences now?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great conference, and it's gotten deeper, especially with the addition to Delaware. This is going to be another super competitive conference. St. Joe's is usually always solid. High Point, same thing. UMass has been down over the last couple of years, but I expect them to rise again. Hobart is always gritty, and then you got the Bonnies. I think the A10, if we're talking about where they rank in conferences, I have them at 6th. Best conference in the country. Yeah, I'm going to have the Big Ten ahead of them, the ACC ahead of them, the Ivy, and I think the Patriot and the Big East as of today are ahead of them. But the A10 competitive-wise is a very competitively great league. But I think obviously the big 3 are going to be ahead, but then I'd lean Patriot and Big East over A10 today.
I think you could make an argument that they might be better than the Big East at this point, and then depending on the way things shake out.
Top of the Big East.
Yeah.
Top of the Big East with Georgetown. Obviously, what Villanova has been able to do the last couple of years has been very solid. Providence, I know Denver's been a little down too, but historically what Denver is as a program, I just think the top of that conference is a little more elevated than the A10 right now, but who knows?
We'll see. This is a conference on the rise, I'm telling you.
100% a conference on the rise.
We've seen Richmond. We've seen St. Joe's. We've seen even High Point mix it up and win some big games recently. So, yeah, keep an eye on the A10. Also, keep an eye on our number 3 team, Hoagie. This one's going to take a little bit of explaining for the audience. Why are we calling this team a wild card?
Yeah, so at number 3, we got the defending national champion, Cornell Big Red. And people are going to be like, wild card. It's more just, we got to see now, what is Cornell without CJ Kirst, right? That has been what the Cornell program has been over the last 5 years. He's the greatest, player in Cornell lacrosse history, one of the greatest players to ever play Division I lacrosse. So obviously it's a new era of Cornell lacrosse, and I'm excited to see kind of where that turns. But that's where that little uncertainty lies, to see, are they going to stay at the top where they are, or are they going to, slide a little bit more towards the middle part of the Ivy League? That's going to be the question.
Yeah, epic career for CJ Kirst. Broke the NCAA goals record last year. Tied the NCAA record for goals in a season with 82. Won the Tewaarton Award. Number 1 pick in both the PLL and the NLL. Oh, yeah, and ended a 48-year title drought for Cornell. Really storybook ending for his career at Cornell. How do the Big Red go about replacing his impact?
Yeah, I mean, you can't just solely replace it. A guy like that, best player in program history, one of the best in the history of the sport. You can't just easily replace him and put someone else out there who's, got a lot of points and a good player. Like, it's going to take a couple guys who really are going to have to step up and, continue that great tradition of elite Cornell attackmen. Think about the great Cornell attackmen who've come before Kirst, Jeff Teat, Rob Pannell, et cetera, et cetera. So the lineage is there and the history is there with this Cornell program. So you're not just going to replace him right off the bat with one player. If you think that's going to happen, it's not. But, the first two guys that come to mind that's really ready to take this next step for this Cornell team as leaders of this offense, obviously Ryan Goldstein last year. Ryan Goldstein had 93 points in 2025, was kind of the Robin to CJ 𝐓𝐄 as Batman, his right-hand man. He's going to be thrusted into a bigger role now as really that main contributor. And then William Firth, another guy who's going to have to step up now as an upperclassman and kind of lead that charge. Every time I see him play, I think he's got great skills, great ability to really be a star player. So it's going to look different with kind of how they use Goldstein. He's a bit of a smaller guy, a little bit more shifty and electric running with the ball, whereas 𝐓𝐄 was more, bigger body, kind of could do everything. But, you have big contributions from guys like that who've made impacts for the last couple of years. And then even guys who made impact on championship weekend, a guy like Ryan Waldman, who had a big goal wearing number 3. I thought it was Rob Piniella championship weekend when he scored that goal on Monday. And then, a guy like Brian Luzzy too, to step up as well. So they have pieces and guys who've contributed over the last couple of years. But, if you're looking at the guy who's got to step up right away, it's Ryan Goldstein to me is the main guy who's going to really be that quarterback.
Yeah, I think all eyes are going to be on Ryan Goldstein. 90 plus points last year. I think it's a little different when you don't have CJ 𝐓𝐄 and Michael Long taking a lot of the attention off you. A couple of 5th and 6th. Michael Long was a 6th year guy. Now you're the guy. Yeah. And Ryan Goldstein's already undersized. So how's he going to handle it when he's all of a sudden got the number 1 pull, shutting him down?
That's going to be interesting to see. Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to downplay Ryan Goldstein. I think he'll be a 𝐓𝐇𝐄 candidate this year, but I am maybe a little bit hitting the brakes on the hype wagon there. I actually, if there's one I'd want to hit the gas on, it's William Firth. I think he's been waiting for that lefty attack spot to open up. Like CJ 𝐓𝐄 obviously has had it on lock. William Firth is going to make himself right at home there. And you're going to think, when did 𝐓𝐇𝐄 get a clone? Like that's what he looks like.
The number and everything. It's like when you see him out there, I'm like, is that 𝐓𝐇𝐄 still suiting up for Cornell? Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it is a good program, but I do want to ask you, because it's not just CJ 𝐓𝐄. I just mentioned Michael Long, but Hugh Kelleher was a first-team All-American and PLL draft pick. Wyatt Noose was their starting goalie. Walker Wallace, team captain, LSM. Jason Singer, their top cover defenseman. They graduated a total of 16 seniors last year. So who do you think was the second biggest loss after CJ 𝐓𝐄?
Yeah, those were all big names that you named right away. When I think of some of those lists, obviously Wyatt Noose is a guy who has been a player for a couple of years. Walker Wallace, a leader, a captain, one of those kind of big competitors for that team that was really big. But to me, I'd say there's probably 2 of the biggest guys. I'd say if you're talking about a guy who's kind of like 𝐓𝐄, irreplaceable, it's Hugh Kelleher. You can't, just replicate that size, that ability that he has on the field in terms of his size, physicality, and how much of a matchup nightmare he is for other defenses. You can't just trot someone else out there to mimic that. So he'll definitely be a big loss in terms of like how they use him. But to me, it's Mikey Long. And I know Mikey Long maybe didn't contribute in terms of points wise as much towards the end of his career, but look, his leadership and experience for being there the whole time, along with his cohesion with CJ 𝐓𝐄. Him and CJ 𝐓𝐄 were high school teammates at Del Barton and New Jersey, so they've been playing lacrosse forever. So kind of into that brotherly backyard ball kind of thing that we talk about, Kev, a guy that just knows where to be, knows what spots to go to, knows how to play off of 𝐓𝐄. And Mikey Long is that exact thing. So it's hard to replicate a guy like that. So I think I'm going to go with Mikey Long and then also Hugh Kelleher. But, a ton of big guys that they're going to lose, but also a ton returning. And, if I've been around the Cornell program, this past year and seeing it all the way through championship weekend, they have one of the best, if not the best culture in the entire country in terms of cohesionness from team, alumni, fans, parents, all that stuff. So I expect no drop off from this Cornell team in terms of how the guys who are next up are going to be ready to go.
I got that as one of their advantages is that championship pedigree in their coaching. And we're going to talk about the coaching in a second, but yeah, I took a little secondhand offense when you called CJ 𝐓𝐄 and Ryan Goldstein Batman and Robin. Cause I feel like Michael Long is the Robin to CJ's Batman.
Yes. I think in terms of like friendship and cohesion, 100%, but if we're talking points and contribution wise, right. Ryan Goldstein, 100%. So yeah, totally a little bit of different context there, but
totally understand that. But yeah, no offense to you, Ryan. Or Mikey, if you heard that. Last question on Cornell that I have for you here. Connor Busick. He's only in his 6th year as head coach. 32 years old. Played in the PLL as recently as 2021 with the Cannons. He's now gone to the NCAA championship twice, won one with 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐋𝐂𝐑𝐿, and he's the USILA Coach of the Year in 2025. I love to put you on the spot and ask you to rank things, conferences, players, coaches. Where do you think Connor Busick ranks among the best coaches in college lacrosse right now?
Wow. I mean, he's definitely got to be up there. I mean, I don't know if I have a specific number of like he's this number, but I mean, he's, I think you make cases with top 5 coaches in the sport as of right now in terms
what
of
coaches would you definitely take over him right now? Tillman.
Right. I'd take Tillman 100%. If we're going down the line, like,
I'd take
I think you have an
Corrigan.
argument. Corrigan, I think Tambroni has an argument. If we're going in the Ivy League, like Andy Shea, but I don't know if I wouldn't take Andy Shea over him right now. Like Lars, I think you could be 50-50 with, like, but he's up there. Like
Danowski, what about Danowski? Are we over it?
I think I would take Busick right now.
You take Busick over Danowski?
I would, yes. I think honestly, if we're talking in this, I think there's a ton of 50-50s of like, I could see an argument either way. I think the only coach that's undisputed ahead of him is John Tillman that everyone would take ahead of Connor Busick. And I think you could maybe say Corrigan and, maybe other guys, but I think of the other top coaches in the sport, there's an argument where you could go either way with that. So Busick's towards the top of the country right now. How young he is, I think it helps the cohesionness of like having played at Cornell, knowing that program, played it, let it. But look, he gets hired in 2020, first full year in 2022. He's only been the coach for 4 full seasons, technically. He's already taken Cornell to Championship Monday twice, won a national championship. Culture's as strong as ever. And I know a lot of the naysayers are going to say, well, let's see what he is without 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐋𝐂𝐑 now, because he's had that pillar of a player for the last couple of years. But no, I love Connor Busick. I think he's a great leader. I think his mindset is great. I think how he approaches the game is great. And above else, what I've learned is culture carries everything in college lacrosse. It carries how well your team is. It carries the buy-in of freshmen, sophomores who maybe aren't seeing, the playing time, but either are going to have to step up with an injury or at some point, but also going to have to step up when they're upperclassmen. So Cornell to me is the best culture in college lacrosse. I saw firsthand last year, from the hard hat to the well-deserved, greater than well said, just so many great pillars that they have in that program. But if you're asking me, if, team start a program, there's not many coaches you'd have in the country over Connor Busick.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome to see last year, all the Cornell connections, and then it all come together for Connor Busick to win that championship. And, we talk about 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐋𝐂𝐑 and we talk about the overall culture of Cornell. And it's like, well, if 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐋𝐂𝐑 really is this generational player that we talk about as, one of the greatest that we've ever seen, then you're going to, there's going to be an impact when he's lost. And I don't know if culture can make up for that entirely. If it could, then Cornell probably would have won a natty somewhere in the last 48 years of that drought. You know what I mean? 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐋𝐂𝐑 is that guy who comes in to a great culture and lifts them to the hill. So while I'm totally fine and think Cornell deserves to be on this list, they are a contender to go back to back. I will say I would be extremely surprised if Cornell wins the national championship without 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐋𝐂𝐑 this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it gives me a little bit of, that's a good point, Kev, of like, why haven't they won in all those years? Is it Connor Busick? If the culture is so, you think of, I don't want to do like a Lane Kiffin analysis here, but like, a guy like Peter Milliman leaving Cornell to go to Hopkins. I don't know why he left or what, but is it like, hey, maybe I got to go to Hopkins to win a championship, but clearly it can be done in Cornell. Of course, are there challenges up in Ithaca to get kids up there with admissions into the school with, Ithaca, no offense, Ithaca, but there's not much going on up there. You kind of have the small town and your teammates and stuff. So it's not the easiest sell on the recruiting trail to get kids to kind of come up to Ithaca to play to Cornell. So when those kids come up there, you got to get a certain type of kid, and a certain type of kid that you're going to get to come up there as a kid who's going to buy into the culture, buy into the teammates, buy into what Cornell lacrosse is. And it's paid dividends over the last couple of years. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I think Cornell's here to stay.
All right. We'll see if they even win the Ivy League, because stay tuned. Might be another team from that conference on this list. We've got 2 more teams to reveal. Just want to say hello to some of you in the comments section. Max, Dennis, love to see you here. Will,
Scotty's in there.
Scotty, I saw Scotty. Awesome. Keep dropping those comments in. Let us know what you think.
Poe, Ryan Beller, former Manhattan teammates in there. I see them in the chat. They're a bunch of guys. So Let's go.
Yeah. So let us know if you agree with Cornell as a wild card team. How would you define them? We're going to jump. Joey. What's up, Joey? Good to see you in the comment section. Washington Township stinks. Let's go to number 2. Who is it?
Number 2, I got the Georgetown Hoyas coming in at number 2. Obviously, we've talked about it on nausea in the preseason right now. The expectations are as high as they've ever been, and it's championship weekend or bust. And people are saying if they don't make championship weekend this year, will they ever make championship weekend, right? So this is a big year for the Hoyas on all fronts. I think they got, depth at each position and, obviously great transfers and experience and, great coach and all that. So they got the whole recipe, to make it to championship weekend. Now they got to, just put it in the oven and hope the outcome comes out right. They got all the ingredients, but I'm excited to see this Georgetown team this year. I think, the last couple of years, it's felt like to me, they've maybe quarterfinals is the farthest they can go. Like I could see them getting there, but they're not beating, Notre Dame 2 years ago or, Maryland last year. But this year, I think they have a legit team that can make championship weekend, but also win a national championship. So I'm excited to see them put it all on the line this year and go out there and go for their 8th straight, which is crazy. 8th straight Big East championship they're going for, which sounds crazy.
Right. I have it up on the screen right there as one of their big advantages is consistency. Just to put it in context, Hoagie mentions they're going for an 8th straight Big East championship, but they've also been to 4 of the past 5 quarterfinals. They've lost in that round each of those times. They've actually only gone to championship weekend one time, believe it or not, in 1999. That's the last time, the only time, the Hoyas have ever been in the NCAA semifinals.
I wasn't even born the last time they made championship weekend, so maybe we'll have a first this year.
Don't remind me. So you're saying all these things. It sounds nice. Yes, they have all the ingredients. You just got to put it in the oven. But why should I believe? Why should I maybe believe that this year's going to be different if I'm a Georgetown fan?
Yeah, I think for me, it's 3 things. It's experience, it's motivation, and they're talented and deep at every single position on the field. To me, there's not one spot where I kind of automatically look at Georgetown and point and say, that's a weak spot. There's not one unit. They have elite players at all positions and all spots on the field. Obviously, if you're starting on the offensive end, they returned 7 of their top 10 scorers back from last season. So they're going to bring back that balance on offense. You think of guys like Jack Ransom, Kevin Miller. Those guys are guys who should lead the charge this year, obviously. And then you got the massive additions of the Connor brothers that everyone's been talking about as maybe the best and biggest transfers in the portal, bringing them over from Colgate to add to those guys who were there last year. So that's on the offensive side of the ball. Then we move to the defensive side of the ball. Ty Banks is going to really anchor that defense. He's been a guy who, we don't talk about a guy that, has been one of the better players in the country in the defensive side of the last couple of years. Ty Banks is that. He's been a true anchor, lockdown defender. 2 years ago when they went into Arlada and beat Notre Dame, he held Pat Kavanaugh to 3 points and really held him in check in that game, and they're only lost that whole season. So, and that was him as a freshman. Ty Banks going to Arlada doing that. He's now a junior. He's ready to go. Then you move on to the goalie. You got, an experienced goalie in Anderson Moore, who another name that not many people, I don't think, really know nationally yet. He's been unbelievable for them, and he's going to continue to be unbelievable for them. This is an experienced goalie. And then, my position, obviously, that I played, that I love watching faceoff guys, Ross Prince last year as a freshman, 62% at the faceoff X as a freshman last year. He was Big East Freshman of the Year and an honorable mention All-American. So if you look, Kev, between OD, goalie, faceoff, they got an elite player and they got depth at all those positions. So to me, that's what makes this different, is that they're elite at every position on the field. They have the talent at every position of this field, but also the motivation to finally get over the hump, I think, is there. And the experience of the guys played a lot of minutes on this team.
Yeah, that's what Clark calls building a team down the middle. The goalie, the defenseman, the faceoff guy, and then an ex-attackman. That's the big question for me, is where, the Connor brothers, how do they fit? Will they be able to replicate what they lose from Aiden Carroll and Fulton Bayman graduating? Aiden Carroll, a PLL caliber guy, first round pick.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, really good player who really came alive. So I'm curious if you think the Connor brothers are going to hit the ground running, or do you think there's a little bit of a learning curve? This isn't Jack Boyden transferring from Tufts to UVA a couple years ago. It's, the Patriot League to the Big East. But do you see a little bit of a learning curve, or are the Connor brothers going to hit the ground running and play like a couple of the best players in the country from day one?
I think they're going to hit the ground running from day one. I think they're that good of players. I think they're ready to step up. I think they're ready for the spotlight, especially a guy like Rory as a graduate. He's played so much lacrosse in his career. At the end of the day, it's still lacrosse at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. You got a ton of experience and games under your belt. You've played in those moments, maybe not on the biggest of stages yet, but you've still played in massive games, in big games, at big venues. So you know what it's like. So to me, we've seen multiple other players too, who've transferred in this new transfer portal, 5th-year COVID era over the last couple of years, transfer from lower schools and be awesome. Think of a guy like Charlie Bertrand transfer from Merrimack all the way on that team at UVA to win a championship. So guys have done it before. And guys who especially have played a lot of games under the belt have been completely fine. So I expect them to be fine. These kids also too, Kev, they're from Manhasset, New York, and on Long Island. So these guys know what big boy lacrosse is. They've played in a ton of big games dating back to high school, club ball, grew up playing with the best in the country. So I don't expect these guys to flinch. I think they'll be ready on day one.
Yeah, I'm definitely buying stock in the Connor brothers. I just had to ask the question. But I want to know who else you're buying stock in on this offense. They got a lot of returning guys and some pieces that I don't think the national landscape really knows about. Maybe you heard them name once or twice in a game, but I'm curious who of these returning scorers on this Georgetown roster you're most excited about heading into 2026.
And I mentioned them a little bit a couple minutes ago, but I'm buying stock on that freshman duo from last year to take a huge jump in 2026. Jack Ranson attack and Kevin Miller out of the midfield. Two guys who were awesome as freshmen a season ago last year. I expect them to take an even bigger leap this year, kind of for this Georgetown team. Those are the two guys right off the bat that jump off of me. But I also like Patrick Krogan's game. I know he had 14 points last year as a junior. I think he's a guy who can definitely elevate a little bit. And then obviously, they got a couple other guys, Jordan Ray and so on and so forth. But to me, that freshman duo from last year, Ranson and Miller, taking that big jump in 2026, to me, I think they're going to be great.
Let me throw one more name out there. Lucas Dudemain. He was injured most of the year, only played in 6 games, but had 13 points in 6 games. And he was pretty big down the stretch in the Big East tournament. He's a Canadian guy. I think he actually plays for Team Italy internationally, but really good player. Had a goal against Maryland in the quarterfinals. He's a guy that I would keep an eye on as well, who could explode this year. They've got guys. They've got a lot of players. I think if you look at the depth and you look at the top end talent that you mentioned, Ty Banks, Anderson Moore, the face-off guy, what's his name? Price?
Ross Prince, yeah.
Ross Prince. Yeah. Those are top end guys already, proven. So it's not like they got to prove themselves this year. It's already like that. And I actually think when you look at it, a lot of these guys have a couple of years. As I mentioned, Liam Connor, who's the better of the two Connor brothers, has a couple of years of eligibility. Ty Banks and Anderson Moore are both juniors. So if it's not this year, it might be next year for Georgetown. See who they get in the transfer portal next year. But I know the Hoyas fans are one season at a time,
Yeah, I think they're just right now, their sole focus, their tunnel vision right now of get me to Charlottesville at all costs. And I know the alums, if they make it to Charlottesville, they're going to pack that stadium out. It's going to be a spectacle to see that tailgate. The Georgetown Hoya tailgate is going to be a celebration of 20 plus years of Georgetown Hoyas lacrosse if they can get to Charlottesville and play in that. So I'm so excited. And yeah, if there's a guy who's going to keep this team loose and ready to go, and, obviously, like we talked about pressure and expectations, it's Kevin Warren. One of the loosest, most fun, cool, calm, collected coaches. You want to talk about the definition of a man. Like, that guy's just a freaking man. That's Kevin Warren to me. That's the guy you want to crack open a beer with after a nice win. So if there's a coach I want to see at a national championship celebration where we're doing MPLS live in the parking lot, I think Kevin Warren would maybe be at the top of that list for sure of just all time, just great dudes and amazing people we have in the sport of lacrosse. But yeah, I think his ability to kind of be like a little bit of a kid and have that fun, cool, calm, collected, keep it light style while also having this team ready to play is going to be something that's going to lighten that load and lighten that pressure and expectation for this team to have them playing loose week after week.
Scotty mentions in the comments, he says, I just want to see Kevin Warren on the big screen.
There we go. Right on cue. I see Scotty right on cue.
Hoagie
right on cue, Scotty talking about Kevin.
Right. Hoagie wants to see him in the tailgate. Maybe that's next week's episode. Top 5 teams we want to party with after they win a natty.
I mean, do you not think, Kevin, that clip of him celebrating after they beat Notre Dame in Arlada years ago, when he did like the somersault and he was jumping up, hugging the guys? I mean, come on.
Get the sick jackets too, man.
He's the man. He wears the fitted too. Where's the Georgetown fitted too on the back?
I loved it last year when Jack Ransom, we mentioned him, but he had 9 goals in the semifinals of the Big East tournament. And like someone tells him after the game, oh, Jack Ransom had 9 goals for the freshman. What do you think? He's like, pretty good. Anyway.
The man.
Yeah. Let's move on now to the number 1 team. Tell us, Hoagie, who is it?
Number 1 team is, honestly, some people might have them preseason number 1. I think Maryland today had 17 votes and is the unanimous number 1. I think if you talked about, the broader scope of things, but if I said it wasn't Maryland, the next name I think you'd hear the most would be the Princeton Tigers here that we have at number 1. Princeton Tigers, this is a team that's been knocking at the door the last couple of years. They finally broke through the championship weekend back in 2022, lost to that, iconic Maryland team that went undefeated. But Princeton is a team that, you want to talk about one of the most fun teams to watch in all of college lacrosse. I mean, this team just loose, free. I still hear Freebird ringing in my head from all those goals last year between them and Cornell in the Ivy tournament. And then, free from desire 2 years ago. I think if you talk about a team who has the best goal song, I like what they do. They do a team goal song. So every goal plays the same song rather than each player has their own. So I'm excited to see what the goal song is. So comment down below what Princeton's goal song is going to be in 2026.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big one.
It makes it a little crazy when the Ivy League final is between Princeton and Cornell and there's 35 combined goals and they both have the same goal song for every goal. It's like, wow, Freebird, great song. Can you listen to it 35 times in one day? So, challenge
That's
accepted.
the question. Yeah. But I mean, you're going to hear it a lot, and you're going to hear the goal song a lot in 2026, whatever song that may be, because this Princeton offense, I'll tell you what, is as prolific, as high-powered as any in the country, and they have been over the last couple of years. This team has got multiple levels of scorers. This team has been pound for pound as they're like a team in college football or the NFL scoring 50-plus points. This offense is explosive, dynamic. I love to watch it. Obviously, they lose Coulter McAsee, who's kind of been that staple of that offense last couple of years, top 5 pick to the Cannons this past year. But
yeah, I want to ask you about that real quick, actually, if we could pause on Coulter McAsee, because we're making such a big deal about Cornell losing CJ Kurse, which is a big deal. He's the NCAA's all-time goal scorer. But Princeton's losing their all-time goal scorer as well, and Coulter McAsee. And I feel like we're just kind of like, oh well, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously McAsee's been the staple of that offense over the years, but like I said, Princeton has this high-powered offense, and they might have pound for pound the most high-powered offense in the country in 2026. They got playmakers all over this field who are ready to spray that ball. I mean, think about it. You got Nate Kabiri, Colin Burns. Clark always mentions it. One of my favorite nicknames, Colin Barbecue Burns. So you got Kabiri, Colin Burns. They're back in attack, obviously. And then you got Peter. I don't even know how to say his real name. Bunano. Yeah, tongue twist. We'll be sure to hear that this year.
We'll hear it a lot.
Take that spot. He's ready to fill that spot, in my opinion.
Well, hold on. Let's pause there again, too. Are you going Bonanno or Palumbo in that lefty spot?
I'm going to Bonanno, and then I think Chad Palumbo out of the midfield. I love Chad Palumbo's game. He was outstanding as well last year, especially I think about his, how he stepped up in that quarterfinal game against Syracuse. I think he had 6 or 7 goals in that game. He was unbelievable. I wouldn't mind having Palumbo down there if you want to put him down there. To me, I think Palumbo's going to run through the midfield. I think him, Tucker Wade, those guys, massive contributors. John Dunphy, fellow Ridgewood cat, shout out to him, has been a guy who's been able to get in the field on that second midfield line for Princeton over the last couple of years. But yeah, this team we're talking about offense is going to be, pound for pound as good as it can be. You got Andrew McMeekin, who's a man-child at the face-off X guy. I think has like a goal a game or something like, either last year or the year before. He's always spraying it. Ryan Croddick, you got back there in goal. So ton of great players for Princeton. They've gotten to the level of year after year, they're a national title contender. Shout out to Coach for building that program up. Coach Madeline, he's done a great job there. And, Princeton has been known for offense, and they're not going to lack it again in 2026.
Any chance, back to the attack configuration, any chance you would go maybe Palumbo and Bonanno on the line, but then take Burns off?
I think the problem with that, and I could see both sides of that, is like Kabiri and Burns have formulated that chemistry of like playing together so well that like I don't want to break up Burns and Kabiri, if that makes any sense. Just I want to keep them two together. So to me, rather than kind of put Palumbo down there and Bonanno down there, and then either Kabiri or Burns, and then send the other one to midfield, I think you got to have Kabiri and Burns down there together, just due to chemistry wise, and then you can fill in with who you want. I wouldn't mind either one. Like I said, I love Chad Palumbo's game, friend of the program, great guy as well, but he's an unbelievable player. So I wouldn't mind him in attack either. But if you were asking me, I'd run Chad out of the box, and then I think you pair him with Tucker Wade and a couple other guys.
Right.
This offense is ready to go.
𝐓𝐇𝐄 and Burns were high school teammates at Georgetown Prep. To me, I'm going Chad Palumbo. I'm sorry. I know that there's all this hype around Bonanno. Dude, I think Palumbo's a dog, and I think he
showed it, so it's hard to argue that for sure.
He's a senior this year. I think he wants to put the team on his back. Whatever they do, they got options. But man, if I'm coach, I'd want that guy on the field as much as possible. And I'd see Bonanno, 100%. And I understand that he's got a ton of potential.
And Bonanno's an underclassman as well. He's only a sophomore, right? Yeah. Or I think he's a junior now.
But there's so much hype around him.
We'll see. We'll see on the field. I know what I'm getting with Chad Palumbo. I know what I'm getting week in, week out of him. So we'll see how that all works out. But, either way, between 𝐓𝐇𝐄, Barbecue Burns, and Palumbo, we're going to have a good offense. I love that nickname. I don't know. That might be my favorite nickname in lacrosse.
I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of Craig Allen in the chat. That might be my favorite.
I would say some Craig Allen.
Yeah, it's always.
Yeah, I see a lot of Craig Allen. Yeah.
Let's talk
Let's
talk a little bit about 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄 a little bit more, because just to create kind of the story arc and everyone understand where 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄 came from. Georgetown Prep kid who was a number 3 overall ranked player in his class, but he was in the same class with Owen Duffy and McCabe Millen. So if you ask me, you heard about playing the second fiddle. He's playing the third fiddle in this class. All eyes on Duffy and Millen, and 𝐓𝐇𝐄 kind of the forgotten guy. 𝐓𝐶Buri's been starting the last 2 years, but again, Colter Maxey's had that number 1 defender. So 𝐓𝐶Buri's always been the number 2 guy. Owen Duffy's a guy who took the number 1 defender since day 1. McCabe Millen got a little taste of what it's like going against the number 1 defender last year. 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄 is going to get it this year. So I think if we're talking about Princeton as a wild card team to potentially go to the national championship and win it, does 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄 have to play at a level that outshines both Duffy and Millen?
I'm going to say no, because I think they have so much firepower on offense that they can have more of a spread of wealth to me than the other 2 guys. I think for Virginia to be successful and make the NCAA tournament, McCabe Millen really has to be that quarterback and step up and be kind of that guy. And then so on and so forth for Owen Duffy on the other way. Duffy and Dom, we've had questions about their health, but I think, UNC without Owen Duffy is a lot different than they are with him. And obviously without 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄 on this offense, yeah, it's going to take a hit and maybe not be the same. But I think if you ask the 3 of those guys, which team could sustain not having one of those the most, or having one of those guys have an off season or a little bit of a slower day, I think it's Princeton, with given what else they have on that offense between the guys we all mentioned before, Kev. So yeah, obviously you expect him to kind of have that, outshine those guys and kind of really reach height of those guys' level. But if you're telling me which of those 3 guys you just mentioned can have more of an off day and can, sustain, a little bit of slower season, it's going to be 𝐓𝐇𝐄 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄 because of what he has around him.
You convinced me. I was thinking the opposite when I asked that question. I was like, it's got to be 𝐓𝐶BUry 𝐍𝐄𝐑𝐄. He's got to outshine both of those guys. I was like, that was a pretty good argument. I agree with you. So you got me there. I'm not going to argue back with you on that one. But I am going to argue with you on this. For Princeton to be the number 1 team, and when we talked about Army, when we talked about Richmond, even when we were talking about Georgetown, we were talking about how great those defenses are. Princeton's defense is not great. It's not. They were the 39th ranked defense in D1 lacrosse last year, averaged almost 11 goals allowed per game. They gave up, as I mentioned, 20 goals to Cornell in the Ivy Championship, gave up 19 goals to Syracuse in the NCAA quarterfinals when they were eliminated. They graduated their best cover defender in Colin Mulshine and their top LSM and Michael Bath. Is defense going to come back to bite this team at some point?
It might, and it has over the last couple of years, Kevin. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. We were doing our ACC and Big Ten preview of hey, can Duke's defense, keep them in games and, win games with scoring 9-10 goals on offense? And Princeton's kind of done the latter of that, of having this dynamic offense that they've tried to outscore you and, kind of win all those games, but they haven't been able to hold up on the defensive end. Scoring, what did they score? 18, 19 goals against Syracuse last year and lost the quarterfinals.
18, yeah, it was 19, 18.
If you told Coach Madeline, hey, coach, you're going to score 18 goals today, you taking that or not? He's going to be like, we won that game 100%, right? You have got to at some point lean on your defense. And yeah, we've turned college lacrosse now in 2026 as a much of an offensive game as it ever has been. And electric offenses, a lot of goals with the shot clock era, but Princeton's tried to win games with offense over the last couple of years, and they've came up short. So the defense is going to have to be the reason that kind of gets them over that hump. Obviously, you lose Colin Mulshine, who was a massive anchor on the defensive end for that team for years. But like I said, you got Ryan Croddick, I think, who's established himself as, I'd say an All-American level type goalie, right? Finn Fox, you obviously expect that close D to have, a jump of a year for him. But to me, the other guys I look at is that short stick D-midi tandem, Cooper Muller, Jackson Green, those two guys. Kind of, we talked about the Richmond tandem of short stick guys over earlier. Those two guys, the short stick D-midi dogs, so they're going to be good too. So yeah, a little bit unproven, but high expectations with those guys. And let's not forget the Princeton D last year was bringing out wooden shafts last year in the tournament run. So if you're bringing out the wooden shafts, you got to really have that defense on lock. So we'll see how they are this year. A little bit unproven, but I expect them to make a jump and be a little bit better. You're not asking this unit, Kev, to be a top 10 unit in the country. You're just asking them to be a manageable defensive unit, and this offense can carry.
Right, but I mean, 90% of the time, that's good enough. But in the games that matter at the end of the day, that's not good enough. I look at a team like Maryland, and the reason I trust them so much, even though they're looking like, hey, maybe their offense could explode this year, is because I know what they're going to bring on the defensive side of the ball. I know what that game is going to be like. When you're watching the Syracuse-Princeton game in the NCAA quarterfinals last year, it was complete, it's an amazing viewing experience as a fan because it's back and forth, anything can happen. But, I don't know. That just doesn't seem like a trustworthy formula to go and win a championship. It seems like a way your offense is great and you're going to rack up a ton of goals and win a bunch of games, but are you going to be able to win the games that matter without a defense like that? I'm looking at the other teams on this top 5. I trust them a little more than Princeton for that reason. I will say the one thing I got to give them, I do think Croddick is a great goalie. If there is a force that could bring that defense together this year, it's him. And those short stick defensive midfielders are pretty good too. But I love watching 100%. Them in transition as much as I do one-on-one defense,
Without a doubt. And like we said, Kev, you're not asking for much out of this unit. It's just don't give up 19 goals, right? How do we get a little bit better? Because we know our offense is going to carry. I think Princeton can sleepwalk to 14, 15 goals on a somewhat of an off day. How do we hold other teams to 11, 12 goals? That's all we're asking, not giving up 18, 19 goals.
Okay,
because I think when this team's on, they're scoring 15, 16, 17, 18 goals. I think in an off day, Princeton's at least 11, 12 goals with that offense. So the goal to me should be hold a team to 11 goals. And I think you're very confident if you can hold a team to 11 goals that Princeton's going to come out on top. But I mean, looking at this top 5 list here, a ton of great games that I'd love to see that I wish happened, like a Princeton Georgetown game. How fun would that be? Obviously Cornell and Princeton, we've seen that matchup for years now as conference foes, and those games will always be fun. How fun would an Army Princeton game or an Army Georgetown game? So many fun matchups, hypotheticals looking at the thing.
Well, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll see some of those matchups in the NCAA tournament this year. But that brings us up to on an hour here. Any final thoughts on this top 5?
Yeah, I think, we talked about wild cards, Kevin. We mentioned at the beginning, but these are legit national title contenders, right? And not wild cards in terms of we don't know what's going on, where they're wild cards in terms of like, these are kind of the best of the rest of what we've talked about, the non-ACC Big Ten schools that we think are true national title type teams. And, I'd be lying if I said that I could see all these teams winning. I'd be shocked, I think, or not shocked, but if Army or Richmond won the national championship,
it'd be absolutely shocking.
A little bit crazy, but no shock if Princeton wins it. No shock if Georgetown wins it. And even though Cornell doesn't maybe have the expectations, I wouldn't be shocked if they won it again, just given, what Connor Busick is as a coach and what they kind of have coming back. So tons of great teams on this list. Excited to see how they all lie. And 2 weeks from now, college lacrosse is back, so we'll see it. So fired up.
I can't wait. And while a Georgetown national championship might not be shocking, it would be unprecedented. So that's why these teams are wild cards. They're all coming from different places, different culture, different experience, winning wise. But to me, all 5 of these teams kind of fit into a category going into the season as one non-ACC and non-Big Ten schools that have a chance to win it legitimately. So thank you all for tuning in. Just quick Reed, I see you in the comments, says good work. Thank you. Scotty, thank you for tuning in.
Appreciate you, Scotty.
Yeah, a couple others that I wanted to shout out before we leave. Lost
Got
it now.
Reed.
Yeah, I saw Reed. Austin said, what's
Reed
up?
Lewis.
But yeah, no, I saw you guys commenting at the end of the stream. If you're just getting here and you missed the beginning and you're like, oh man, Richmond's my team, I missed the whole analysis, check us out on YouTube. I'm going to upload the whole video tomorrow in full. So you can find it there on the Lacrosse Network YouTube channel. But for James Hogan and for the Lacrosse Network, I'm Kevin Boilard. We're wrapping this thing up. I'll catch you all later. Peace.